Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. This is going to be a somewhat perfunctory recent reads video. Recent reads videos are a series of videos that I make when I have completed a handful of books. Generally, I try to make them after every 3 books. Sometimes a 4th book will slip in there. Just sort of wrapping up summarizing my reading for that span of time. I have a little book somewhere where I note down, I log all of my reading. It's been a while since I last filmed one of these because February turned out to be a very, very slow reading month for me. In fact, in terms of where I had anticipated being at this period of time, I figured I would be further along in certain of my plans. I am in the midst of a project reading books by or translated by or edited by anthropologist Chang. I most recently finished The Archaeology of Ancient China, and it was a very good overview of all of the various sites, the excavations, what had been known at that time, about 40 years ago, I think. I hope to follow it up with some more current reading on the topic. I am now in the midst of his history of the Chang dynasty, and I will be finishing that up fairly soon. I think that the last video that I made of this probably went into sufficient detail to give you a good sense of the book. At some point, I hope to read its contemporary counterpart, if I can just pinpoint exactly which book that might be, an overall introduction to the archaeology of ancient China, and see how much I would recommend going with the latest information. Still probably something from about 10 years ago, but generally speaking, with archaeology, that is probably the best idea. But I read Chang when I was fairly young, not understanding anything at all, and I really do like his writing style. So that has carried me through. The book is a lot of descriptions of archaeological finds, all of the objects that were retrieved, and interspersed with a little bit of generalizing about what the archaeological evidence means toward the history of China, how earlier preconceptions of how that history went down have gotten shaken up by archaeology, which really is only going strong in China for about 100 years now. So and this book being something like 40 years old, it was even younger at the time. But I did enjoy this, and it is an absolutely beautiful book. I mean, I was lucky that I got a hardbound. I didn't realize it. And for a person who doesn't know much about archaeology, I did find it readable. And I am finding that when it comes to China, I am honing my interest, so to speak, and becoming more and more interested in the earliest periods, because as with the book on the Chang that I'm reading now, China is a very interesting case study for the very earliest of humanity and a huge bulk of humanity population-wise. So then after that, I read The Tale of the Heike, not in this translation, however. I mistakenly bought that after I had this sitting on my shelf for a couple of years, and there, maybe you can see the name better. I really enjoyed this translation. Edward Seidensticker wrote the introduction to it, and he gave his approval to this translation. He is a favorite translator of mine for ancient, not ancient, for Japanese literature. I don't even know what I'm saying. You know, I think he did the Snow Country that I read. He did the Tale of Genji that I read. There's a couple other things from the Heian period, which he translated, that I read, the Gossamer years, I think. I could be wrong on that. And it tells the story of a period of great upheaval in the history of Japan. I have never studied any Japanese history, so I was a bit lost as far as putting the book in context, but it does a marvelous job of creating a world. You talk about world building, and in many respects it was reminiscent of Homer's Iliad. It's a grand war tale, and the tale emerged out of an oral tradition, but at some point when that tradition was evaporating or ceasing to be, it got written down, and this is the pretty much standard text. I haven't heard that it exists in multiple variations, just as Homer does not exist in multiple variations, but some of the tales here and there do, and I would imagine that it is the same with this. It was really a wonderful reading experience, also simply because of the fact that my own country, the United States, is enduring a great upheaval in the political structure at this time. So there were points in common that were very easy to identify with. If I had read this, say, 10 years ago, I don't know that I would have seen it as a sort of a historical document. It's not a history, but it does recount. It is based on historical events. And unlike, say, Homer's Iliad, which it's hard to say whether such a thing as the Trojan War ever happened. I mean, we know that wars did happen, and Homer was trying to recapture some of that, but there's no sort of plot that corresponds with any kind of reality that we know in ancient Greece. But this, of course, does. My hope will be at some point soon to complement my reading about China with a history of Japan. I've never read anything except for, I think it's Ivan Morris on, I think it's the World of the Shining Prince, where he talks about the Heian period in Japan. But I would like to read a head-to-tail history, if such a thing exists. I'm sure they do, but I would want to find a reputable one, and one with a prose style that I like. So we'll see how that goes. And then when I finish this, the next thing that I read was No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. And I enjoyed this book. But let me rephrase that. I had heard about this author. I believe he meant something to Qiu Miaojin, and last year I read both of her books. Notes of a Crocodile, which is very famous in Taiwan, at least, amongst the gay and lesbian community primarily, I believe. And Last Words of Montmartre, which I've said this before, it reads as an extended suicide note. This book is told in the format of notebooks. The author says you can read them in any sequence. I didn't. I read it from head to toe. I'm using that a lot, aren't I? But that format was derived from this book, and she was greatly influenced by this. Of the two, I would say that his book is the better. I'm not going to say that I particularly enjoyed it, but both Chiu Miao-jin and Osamu Dazai in the end succumbed to suicide. And that may well be an aspect of what drew the Chinese author to him. She didn't want him there. Where was I? This book is the better written. He is not a particularly likable narrator, but this cleaves very tightly to lived experience, I believe, recounting his first 30 years, something like that. He attempted suicide numerous times, always with a partner, a female companion, I believe. And in one instance, the young woman he was with died while he was rescued, pulled out from the river, and that impacted his life. Now he is sitting on her, but I guess that's okay. I wish I could remote let you see what is going on, but she's giving him a disgruntled look, but I guess she's okay with it. He led something of a dissolute life, a lot of whoring and drinking and smoking, that kind of thing. A lot of trying to find meaning out of a meaningless existence, and never really succeeding, except I suppose insofar as he was writing things. But now I'm slipping into biography. I would like to read a biography of this author, frankly, to come to terms with how much this is straight memoir and how much of it is fiction. I think that the characters became something of composite representations of people that he knew, but certainly some of the events were pretty well taken down from life experience. I'll read you a little paragraph. And I think it says no longer human, but I think the title really should be should be translated as disqualified from being human. This is translated by Donald Keene, who is one of the great olden Japanese translators. I've heard a lot about him. Back in the day, there were a handful of translators, and his name was one of the foremost, but I don't really recall that I've read anything by him. I've read an awful lot of Seidensticker. I think Seidensticker did the Kawabata books that I've read as well. I'm not sure, though, that I ever read anything by Keene. But anyhow, let me read a paragraph here. My true nature, however, was one diametrically opposed to the role of a mischievous imp. Already by that time, I had been taught a lamentable thing by the maids and men servants. I was being corrupted. I now think that to perpetrate such a thing on a small child is the ugliest, vilest, cruelest crime a human being can commit. But I endured it. I even felt as if it enabled me to see one more particular aspect of human beings. I smiled in my weakness. If I had formed the habit of telling the truth, I might perhaps have been able to confide unabashedly to my father or mother about the crime, but I could not fully understand even my own parents. To appeal for help to any human being, I could expect nothing from that expedient. Supposing I complained to my father or my mother or to the police, the government, I wondered if in the end I would not be argued into silence by someone in good graces with the world, by the excuses of which the world approved. There's one further mention made of that, and the sense is, and this is my reading into the text, that he was sexually molested routinely by a female servant of the household, and she enlisted the help of other servants, and to them it was something of a joke, and that scarred his life thereafter. He does not say anything as clearly as that. That's perhaps something that would be revealed in a biography. I looked at the reviews at Amazon and nobody mentioned that. They just treated it as sort of a story of a guy, but I see it much more as the story of a guy whose life spun out of control because of some early traumatic experiences. He does recount some experiences with his father. His father, I think, died fairly early for him, but he was not the sort of upright son that they hoped he would grow into. I next plan to read this book. I am reading something by a Korean author at the moment, another very short book, and then I'm going to tackle this, which was his last published book before he died, and then this was his first posthumous book. I don't know if there were others, but I will probably leave it go with these two. I just think these covers are beautiful. I think it might have been New Directions. Yeah, New Directions. I will keep my eyes out for these, but I'm not going to order copies. It's not the kind of thing that I'm likely to go back to, but I think it would be a nice companion on my shelf with these two. I will leave off there. That's how it has been going. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.